Welcome to this peaceful moment. Here, you will discover stories inspired by the quiet beauty of Japan. Each tale is like a soft breeze through a bamboo grove, carrying you away from the worries of the day. Imagine the scent of blooming cherry blossoms and the gentle flow of a nearby clear stream. Let these words and sounds cradle your mind in calm and serenity. Tonight, permit yourself to drift into a restful sleep. Let us begin this journey together. Reflections of Moon and Mist. Prologue. The mirror of the lake. The lake lay silent at the edge of the valley, shrouded in mist. Villagers said it was a place where the veil between worlds thinned, where the moon, gazing upon its own reflection, whispered secrets to the earth. On nights of stillness, when the surface was glass, it was said one might glimpse not merely the moon, but memories, dreams, and things yet to come. Akihiro, the son of a fisherman, had grown up hearing these stories. His father dismissed them as superstition, but his grandmother, who often sat by the hearth with eyes lost in memory, would tell him, "The mist hides, but it also reveals. Remember, child, the lake reflects more than water." One night, when the moon hung full and pale above the mist, Akihiro found himself drawn to the lake. Standing at its edge, he felt the world grow hushed, as though waiting. The reflection of the moon rippled faintly, and for a moment, he thought he saw a figure within it, someone standing on the other side of the glass. And then the mist closed in, swallowing the vision whole. Chapter 1. The Whisper in the Mist. Akihiro returned the next evening, unable to shake the image. The village was asleep, but he slipped out, drawn as if by invisible hands. The lake was waiting. Mist curled across its surface, drifting like living breath. When he leaned closer, he heard it, a faint voice, carried as though through the water. "Do you hear me?" He nearly stumbled back. The voice was soft, feminine, tinged with sorrow. He glanced around. No one. Only mist and water. "Yes," he whispered, uncertain. The moon's reflection shimmered, and within it appeared the outline of a girl, standing as though on the opposite side of a mirror. Her hair flowed like ink upon water, her eyes luminous. "My name is Mizuki," she said, though her lips did not move. "I am bound within this mist. You are the first to hear from me in many years." Chapter 2. The Girl of the Reflection. Night after night, Akihiro returned. Mizuki spoke little of herself, but he learned fragments. She had once lived in the valley long ago, before the lake had taken its present form. A flood, she said, had swallowed her village. The survivors rebuilt farther down the valley, but she had never left. "Were you drowned?" Akihiro asked once, cautiously. Her gaze lowered. "In a way. The waters claimed me, but my spirit lingered. The moon took pity and gave me this form, reflection within mist." Akihiro felt sorrow, but also wonder. She was no ghost of terror, no restless curse, only a lonely soul bound to the lake. And as the days passed, his visits became not of curiosity, but companionship. They spoke of the changing seasons, of the world beyond the valley, of dreams they would never share in the same world. Chapter 3: The Promise Under the Moon. One evening in late summer, as cicadas fell silent and the air turned heavy, Mizuki spoke differently. "Akihiro," she whispered, "there is a way for me to be free." His heart leapt. "Tell me." She explained that when the moon and mist aligned perfectly once every century, the barrier weakened. A mortal could cross, but only through choice and sacrifice. What sacrifice? Mizuki's eyes, luminous in the water, filled with both hope and dread. "The one who calls me must offer part of his life, the breath of years. In return, I could step beyond reflection, live again, even if only for a time." Akihiro stood silent. The thought of losing years of his life for a dreamlike girl troubled him. Yet when he looked at her face, serene yet burdened by endless solitude, the weight of choice pressed harder than fear. Chapter 4: The Warning of the Elders. That autumn, whispers reached the village. Some elders noticed Akihiro's absences and grew suspicious. One evening, his grandmother confronted him. "You've been to the lake." Akihiro faltered. Yes." Her eyes clouded with sorrow. "I warned you. The lake remembers the dead. Its beauty conceals danger. You must not let its whispers claim you." He tried to explain Mizuki, her sorrow, her humanity. But his grandmother shook her head. "Even a gentle spirit belongs not to our world. If you trade years for her, you steal from your own life. Remember, reflections cannot walk the earth without cost." Yet, in his heart, Akihiro felt torn. To abandon Mizuki was to condemn her to solitude forever. To help her meant altering his fate. Chapter 5: The Night of Alignment. Winter arrived, sharp and clear. On the night of the new year, the moon rose full, and the mist thickened, as if the entire valley held its breath. Akihiro stood at the lake's edge, trembling. Mizuki appeared, her form clearer than ever, almost stepping from the water already. "It is time," she whispered. "If you call me now, I can cross." Akihiro closed his eyes. His grandmother's warning echoed, but so did Mizuki's voice, fragile as frost. He stepped forward, lowering his hand into the reflection. The water was cold, yet alive, tugging at his breath. Mizuki reached out, her hand meeting his across the barrier. For the first time, he felt warmth, not water, not mist, but skin. The moon flared in the reflection, light scattering like shattered glass. Chapter 6: The Breath of Years. Pain seared through Akihiro as if years were torn from his lungs. His body weakened, yet his heart surged with determination. Mizuki stepped forward, her reflection solidifying into flesh. She gasped as her feet touched the earth, her form trembling in the cold night air. "Akihiro," she whispered, tears shining in her eyes. "You gave me life." He staggered, his strength waning, but he smiled. "Then live it. Even if only for a while." The mist swirled, wrapping around them. The moon shone like a guardian above, and for the first time in centuries, Mizuki felt the weight of air, the scent of pine, the warmth of another's hand. Chapter 7 Days of Borrowed Time. Through the winter and into the spring, Mizuki lived among the villagers. Though many were wary, her kindness and quiet grace softened them. She helped in the fields, sang by the hearth, and walked with Akihiro along the river banks. But always, she knew her time was limited. The breath she had been given was borrowed, tethered to Akihiro's sacrifice. One evening, beneath blossoming plum trees, she said softly, "When my time ends, do not mourn me. I would rather have one season in your world than eternity in silence." Akihiro clasped her hand, tears unspoken. Chapter 8 Return to Mist. Summer came, and with it, Mizuki's breath grew thin. She weakened, her steps faltering. The villagers, who had grown fond of her, mourned quietly, though none dared speak of it aloud. On her final evening, Mizuki asked Akihiro to take her back to the lake. The mist rose once more, gentle, familiar. She stood at the water's edge, her body fading like dew. "Thank you," she whispered. "Because of you, I touched the world again." Akihiro's voice broke. "I would give my years again, 1,000 times." She smiled, radiant as moonlight, before dissolving into the mist, her reflection rippling into nothingness. Epilogue Reflections of Moon and Mist. Years later, Akihiro grew old, his hair silver, his back bent from labor. Yet he never regretted the years he had given away. On still nights, when the moon shone on the lake, he would sit at its edge. Sometimes, within the mist, he thought he saw her form smiling, gentle, waiting. The villagers still whispered of the lake, its reflections, its mysteries. But Akihiro alone knew its truth, that love could bridge even the boundary of mist and moonlight, if only for a fleeting season. And in that reflection, the memory of Mizuki lingered eternal, fragile, beautiful. The Path Between Two Rivers. Prologue The Fork of Waters. There was a path no wider than a man's shoulders, running between two rivers. To the left, the River of Dawn, clear and swift, its waters sparkling with the promise of beginnings. To the right, the River of Dusk, deep and slow, its currents carrying a darker weight, as though collecting the echoes of all that had ended. Few dared to walk the path at twilight, when the light dimmed and the murmurs of the two rivers blended into one endless whisper. The villagers of Hoshimura believed that those who walked there might lose their way, not in the path itself, but in time, returning older, younger, or not at all. Akemi, a young woman of the village, had heard these tales all her life. Yet something in her heart, curiosity, perhaps longing, drew her toward that narrow line of earth between waters. For she had lost her brother, Haruto, to the River of Dusk 5 years ago, when he fell in during a storm and never resurfaced. And sometimes, when the night was quiet, she thought she heard his voice in the rush of waters. Chapter 1 The Whisper of the Currents. The first time Akemi stepped onto the path, the air seemed to shift. To her left, the river of dawn caught the last light of the sun, scattering it into gold. To her right, the river of dusk glowed faintly with the rising moon, silver upon its depths. She walked slowly, listening. The river's voices were not silent, they spoke, though not in words. The dawn river rushed with laughter, childhood memories, and the scent of plum blossoms in spring. The dusk river moved with sighs, autumn leaves, and the weight of farewells. And there, between them, Akemi heard something else, a whisper. Akemi. She froze. It was his voice. Haruto's voice, carried faintly by the waters of dusk. Chapter 2. A Brother's Shadow. Night after night, she returned. Sometimes the voice was clear, sometimes distant. Once, when the moon was full, she saw a flicker in the river of dusk, a silhouette, a boy standing on the far bank, his hand raised. "Haruto!" she cried, stepping forward. The ground beneath her feet trembled, as though the rivers pulled at her. But the image dissolved, leaving only dark water. The elders warned her. The path is not a road, child. It is a boundary. Step too far, and you will belong to neither river, nor to this world. But Akemi could not turn away. The rivers called her, and the promise of her brother's presence bound her feet to that haunted path. Chapter 3. The Keeper of the Path. One evening, as she lingered, she was not alone. An old man appeared at the far end of the path, walking with a staff of willow wood. His robe was the color of earth, his eyes pale as river stone. "You seek the dead," he said softly, as though he had always known. Akemi bowed, though fear prickled her. "I seek my brother." The man tapped his staff against the ground. "The rivers divide the world, child. One carries the flow of life forward. The other gathers all that has passed. To walk between them is to tempt both." "Can I reach him?" she asked, desperate. The man's gaze lingered on her face, long enough that the sound of both rivers filled the silence. "At last," he said, "there is a night when the two rivers touch. When dawn and dusk meet at their farthest bend, a bridge appears. But crossing it requires offering part of yourself, memory, or years. Once you give it, you cannot take it back." Chapter 4. The Night of Convergence. The day came at midsummer, when twilight stretched long across the valley. Akemi stood upon the path, heart trembling, as the rivers swelled beside her. The sky was neither day nor night, but both, painted in hues of violet and silver. Ahead, where the path narrowed, a shimmer formed. Across the waters, she saw him, Haruto, unchanged, as though 5 years had never passed. Akemi. His voice was clearer now, carried by both currents. She stepped forward, but the keeper's voice echoed in her mind, an offering. "What must I give?" she cried to the rivers. The answer came not in words but in feeling her memories. The laughter of childhood, the faces of her parents, and the warmth of every moment she had lived. To reach Haruto, she would have to surrender what tethered her to the village, to herself. Chapter 5. The Choice of Waters. Haruto reached out, his eyes filled with longing. "Sister, I am here. Come." Akemi's heart burned. She had waited, wept, and prayed for this moment. But as she stood there, she realized if she gave everything, she would be nothing but a hollow shadow beside him. She took one step forward. The bridge shimmered beneath her feet. But then she saw his eyes sad, not pleading. And she understood. "You are part of the river now," she whispered, tears streaming. "If I take you back, I lose myself. And you lose your place." Haruto smiled, faint but true. "Then remember me. Do not surrender who you are. I am not lost, Akemi. I flow in the dusk, and in your heart." The rivers roared, light and shadow colliding. The bridge dissolved, and Haruto's form faded into mist. Chapter 6: The Return to the Village. Akemi fell to her knees, weeping as the rivers receded. The moon rose, the dawn faded, and the path was only earth between waters once more. She returned to Hoshimura, carrying no brother in her arms, but carrying his words. From then on, she still walked the path but not to seek him. She walked to listen to the laughter of the river of dawn, the sighs of the river of dusk, and the harmony between them. In time, others joined her. Children, who once feared the path, came to hear her stories. She told them of the rivers not as curses, but as mirrors of life beginnings and endings, joined by the narrow way we all must walk. Epilogue: The Path Between Two Rivers. Years later, when Akemi was old, she returned one last time. The rivers were the same, eternal and flowing. She stood in the middle, listening. And she heard it again, not only Haruto's voice, but many voices. The laughter of her parents, the cries of newborns, the whispers of farewells. The rivers no longer frightened her. They were not two, but two currents of the same endless flow. As the mist gathered and the moon shone, Akemi smiled. She had walked the path her whole life, between beginnings and endings, between loss and love. And when she closed her eyes, she felt Haruto's hand in hers once more, not in flesh, not in shadow, but in the eternal song of the rivers. The lantern's shadow on water. Prologue: The flicker beneath the surface. The night was still, save for the soft rustle of reeds along the pond's edge. A single lantern floated gently upon the water, its flame wavering in the breeze. Each ripple bent its glow, casting shadows that seemed to stretch deeper than the pond itself, shadows that whispered of things unseen. Villagers often released lanterns onto the pond during the Festival of Souls, believing the light would guide ancestors back to their families for a single night. Yet among them, there was always one tale retold in hushed tones that if you watched the lantern's shadow on the water too closely, you might see more than just light. You might glimpse another world, or the faces of those you longed for most. Aya had heard this story many times, but she had never believed it. Until the night her father's lantern drifted farther than the rest, and in its shadow, she thought she saw him looking back. Chapter 1: The Festival of Souls. The village of Hoshikawa stirred with quiet reverence as twilight fell. Families gathered at the pond's edge, carrying lanterns carefully painted with prayers, names, and delicate blossoms. The surface of the water mirrored the evening sky, so that each lantern released looked like a star falling into a second heaven. Aya stood apart, her lantern clutched tightly in her hands. She had painted it with her father's name, her brush trembling as she wrote the characters. He had been gone for nearly a year, carried away by illness that came too suddenly, too cruelly. Her mother urged her to join the others, but Aya lingered, watching the glow of hundreds of lanterns drift out together. When at last she placed her lantern onto the water, her reflection shimmered beside it. She whispered, "Father, can you hear me? Will you come back, even just for tonight?" The lantern floated gently away. But the shadow beneath it did not move as the others did. It deepened, stretched, as though reaching toward her. Aya blinked, breath caught in her chest. For a fleeting moment, in that wavering darkness, she saw the outline of a man's face. Chapter 2 The Shadow Beckons. The days that followed felt strange. Aya returned to the pond at dusk, long after the festival had ended. Though the lanterns were gone, the water seemed to remember. When the wind calmed and the surface smoothed, she saw again a faint shadow dancing beneath, like the flame of a lantern without light. Each night, the shadow grew clearer. A hand reaching upward. A voice carried in ripples, too faint to be real. Aya, her heart ached. It was his voice, her father's. She knew she should be afraid, but instead she felt only longing. The villagers whispered of her visits. The elder warned her the shadow of a lantern is not of this world. It is a gate. If you linger too long, the water will claim you. But Aya could not turn away. She was certain her father was waiting. Chapter 3 The Keeper of the Pond. On the seventh night, Aya was not alone. An old woman appeared, seated by the reeds, her presence so quiet that Aya had not noticed her at first. Her hair was white as ash, her kimono dark as ink. In her hands, she held no lantern, only a staff carved with the shape of a lotus. "You have seen him," the woman said, her voice neither stern nor kind, but knowing. Aya's lips trembled. "My father. He is there, in the shadow." The woman nodded slowly. "The lantern's shadow is where the living and the dead brush against one another. It is not a place to linger, child. To reach across, you must give something in return." Aya's eyes widened. "What must I give?" The woman gazed into the water, her reflection broken by the ripples. "A memory. Perhaps the brightest one you hold. Or a piece of your years yet to come. The river of shadow does not let go of what it takes." Chapter 4 The Choice Beneath the Flame. The following night, Aya returned carrying another lantern. She lit it with trembling fingers and set it upon the water. The flame caught the wind, flickering, until the shadow beneath stretched long and deep. And there he was. Her father's face, clearer than before, was smiling with the warmth she remembered. "Aya," he whispered, his voice like the hush of the reeds. "Do you seek me still?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I miss you. I want to see you again." The shadow shifted, forming the outline of a hand reaching toward her. She reached back, her fingertips brushing the water's surface. The air chilled, pulling at her breath. The woman's warning echoed a memory, or your years. Aya's mind swirled. If she gave a memory, what would vanish? The sound of her father's laughter? The warmth of his hand on hers? If she gave years, she might never live long enough to carry his stories forward. Yet the yearning in her heart was stronger than fear. She whispered, "If it takes a piece of me, then let it. Only let me see you once more." Chapter 5: The Crossing of Shadows. The pond rippled, light bending as though a hidden doorway opened. Aya's lantern glowed brighter, casting a path of flame across the water. She stepped forward without realizing, the surface was firm beneath her feet like glass. Her father stood on the other side, waiting, unchanged. He reached out, his smile both tender and sorrowful. "Aya, you came." She ran to him, but the closer she drew, the heavier her heart became. Her chest ached, as if something precious was being drawn from her. And then she understood her memories were fading. The sound of his voice as she remembered it, the details of his face, even the scent of the earth after rain when he used to work in the fields. "No," she gasped. "Not that, please, not the memories." Her father's shadowed form wavered. He placed a hand over hers, though it felt like cold mist. "Do not forget me, Aya. That is the price of staying." Chapter 6: The Return of Light. Aya staggered, clutching at the air. The lantern's flame sputtered, and the path across the water trembled. "I don't want to lose you," she cried. "But if I give up my memories, then even if I see you now, you'll fade from me forever." Her father's shadow softened. "Then remember, Aya. Let me go, and carry me not as a shadow, but as the light I once was in your life." The flame dimmed. The water stirred. The shadow broke apart, dissolving into countless ripples of light. Aya fell to her knees at the pond's edge, her lantern drifting away, its flame steady once more. She wept, not from loss, but from release. For she realized she had not truly lost him. He lived in her heart, in the warmth of her days, in the stories she would tell to those who came after. Epilogue: The lantern's shadow on water. Years passed, and Aya became known as the keeper of the festival. Each year, she guided children in painting their lanterns, teaching them that the light was for remembrance, not for clinging. And sometimes, when the lanterns drifted out and their shadows stretched deep upon the pond, Aya would smile. For she knew shadows were not prisons, but reminders that behind every shadow was a flame, and behind every goodbye, a love that had once burned bright. When at last her own lantern was set upon the water, those who watched swore its shadow lingered longer than the rest, as if waiting. And in that lingering shadow, there was no sorrow, only the gentle echo of a father's voice calling home. The foxes whisper in the bamboo. Prologue: the breath of the forest. The bamboo grove was never silent. Even on nights when the moonlight cast its silver glow over every stalk, the grove swayed with voices, a chorus of rustles, a cadence of sighs. Yet among these sounds, there was one that villagers feared to hear: the whisper of the fox. Legends told of foxes who lived within the grove. Their voices carried not on the wind, but through the hollow bamboo itself. Those who listened too closely might be led astray, wandering until dawn with no memory of where their feet had carried them. Some returned speaking of visions, faces of loved ones long gone, or paths that twisted into endless forests. Others never returned at all. Aya had grown up with these tales, yet she could not bring herself to fear the whispers. To her, they sounded less like trickery and more like longing. And perhaps, just perhaps, the fox had something it wished to tell her. Chapter 1: The Village by the Grove. The village of Kasaragi lay nestled between the mountains, its rooftops barely visible against the rising mist at dawn. Farmers bent their backs to the earth, their fields stretching out like patchwork under the shifting seasons. Children chased each other through the narrow lanes, their laughter carried by the morning breeze. But always, on the edge of the village, stood the bamboo grove. Tall and endless, its green pillars stretched toward the sky like the walls of another world. At night, when the wind stirred, villagers would bar their doors and whisper prayers, fearful of the fox's voice that wound its way through the hollow stalks. Aya lived with her grandmother in a small home closest to the grove. Her father, once a woodcutter, had vanished into it when she was only a child. Some said the foxes had claimed him. Others said he had lost his way, swallowed by the endless paths. Her grandmother rarely spoke of it, but Aya had grown up listening to the bamboos rustle with quiet defiance. Each evening, she sat by the edge of the grove, listening. Sometimes she thought she heard her father's voice within the whispers, calling her name, faint as the sigh of wind. Chapter 2: The Whisper at Dusk. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in copper hues, Aya lingered near the grove longer than usual. The cicadas had quieted, and the bamboo stirred with a rhythm like breath. Then she heard it, a whisper so clear it froze her in place. Aya! Her heart leapt. She turned, but there was no one. Only the grove swaying gently, its shadows stretching long across the earth. She stepped closer, her hand brushing against the cool stalks. Again, the whisper came, slipping through the bamboo as though carried by the hollow chambers inside. Follow. Her pulse quickened. Every story, every warning told by her grandmother surged back. But stronger than fear was the ache of memory, the thought that it might truly be her father's voice reaching for her across the years. Chapter 3: The Path Between Stalks. The grove enveloped her in an instant. The air inside was cooler, tinged with the earthy scent of soil and moss. The light dimmed, though the moon had already risen. Each stalk towered above her, stretching endlessly, its leaves whispering in the breeze like 1,000 hushed voices. Aya followed the sound, her footsteps muffled by fallen leaves. The whispers guided her deeper, always just ahead, never quite close enough to grasp. Time lost its meaning. She could not tell if she had walked for minutes or hours. At last, she came upon a clearing where the bamboo parted around a pool of moonlight. And there, sitting upon a fallen stalk, was a fox. Its fur gleamed like silver in the pale light, its eyes dark and knowing. Yet when it spoke, the words came not from its mouth, but from the air itself, echoing through the bamboo. "You heard me, child." Aya froze. Her breath trembled in her chest. Who are you?" The fox tilted its head, its eyes unblinking. "I am the whisper that lingers in the hollow. I am the breath that carries what has been lost." Chapter 4: The Bargain of Whispers. The fox's gaze held hers, calm yet unsettling. "You seek someone," it said. "A voice you once knew." Aya's throat tightened. "My father. Did you take him?" The fox's tail flicked, brushing against the leaves. "Not I. The forest itself holds many paths. Some lead the living astray, some carry them into silence. But his voice lingers. That is what you hear." Aya's eyes widened. "You mean he is here?" "In the whispers," the fox answered. "But to hear him fully, to walk beside him again, you must give me something in return." Her heart raced. "What would you take?" The fox leaned closer, and though its mouth did not move, its voice filled the grove like the rustle of countless leaves. "A memory. The brightest one you hold. Or, if you prefer, the sound of your own voice. Without it, you will never speak again." Aya staggered back, her hands trembling. Yet even as fear pressed down on her, she thought of her father, of the chance to see him once more, to speak with him, even if it cost her dearly. Chapter 5: The Face in the Whisper. Aya returned to the clearing night after night, torn by the bargain. The fox waited patiently each time, its silver fur luminous against the darkness, its voice ever calm. At last, on the 7th night, she placed her hands upon the bamboo stalk beside her, whispering, "If I give you my brightest memory, will I see him?" The grove stilled. The fox's eyes glimmered. Yes. Aya closed her eyes. She thought of her father's laughter, the way it filled their small home like sunlight. She thought of the evenings he would carry her upon his shoulders, pointing at the stars. That was her brightest memory. And as she gave it, she felt it slip from her heart, fading like smoke in the wind. The bamboo stirred. The whispers deepened. And then, Aya, her father's voice. Clear, strong, as though he stood beside her. She turned, and for a moment she saw him, his figure outlined in moonlight, smiling with warmth that ached to behold. "Father!" she cried, though tears blurred her vision. She reached for him, but the figure wavered, dissolving like mist. Only his voice remained, lingering within the bamboo. Chapter 6: The Fox's Truth. Aya collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Why can't he stay?" The fox's shadow loomed over her. "Because he belongs not here, nor with me. You gave a memory to glimpse what lingers. But the dead cannot return, no matter the longing." Her chest ached with emptiness where her brightest memory had been. Already she struggled to recall her father's laughter, the shape of his smile. All that remained was the faint echo of his whisper in the bamboo. "Then why let me see him at all?" she asked. The fox lowered its head. "Because the forest remembers. Because even shadows wish to be known. And because your heart called louder than fear." Epilogue: the whisper that remains. Aya returned from the grove with a hollow ache, yet also a strange peace. Though her brightest memory was gone, the whispers of the bamboo no longer frightened her. She heard them now as songs, voices of those who had passed, lingering in the breath of the earth. In time, she became the village's storyteller. Children gathered around her, wide-eyed, as she spoke of the fox in the bamboo, of the voices that lingered like wind through hollow stalks. She told them not to fear the whispers, but to listen, for they carried both loss and love. And sometimes, when the night was still and the bamboo swayed with 1,000 sighs, Aya would close her eyes and hear it again, her father's voice, faint but enduring. The fox watched from the shadows, its silver fur glimmering, its whisper carried with the wind. It had taken her memory, but it had also given her something in return: the strength to live with both sorrow and light. And so the bamboo grove whispered on, eternal, carrying with it the voices of the past, and the quiet promise that even in loss, love remained. The quiet song of autumn night. Prologue: the last cricket's call. Autumn had draped itself across the mountains like a quiet shroud. The rice fields shimmered with golden stubble left after harvest, and the air grew sharp with the scent of fallen leaves. Each evening, as the village settled into silence, the faint song of crickets lingered, a thread of sound fragile enough to vanish at any breath of wind. It was said that when the crickets sang their final songs, the world leaned closest to the boundary between the living and the departed. The villagers, though pragmatic in their daily lives, did not dismiss such whispers of the unseen. Doors were closed early, and lamps kept burning through the night. But to Haru, a boy of 16, the song of the crickets was not ominous. It was comforting, like a voice that had always been beside him. Since his mother's passing the year before, the sound filled the emptiness of his home. It reminded him of evenings she would sit by the veranda, humming quietly in rhythm with the insects' song. And on one such night, when the moon hung pale and hollow above the rooftops, Haru heard something different, an echo within the cricket's melody, almost like a voice calling his name. Chapter 1: The Village of Falling Leaves. The village of Akigawa lay between two ridges of mountains, surrounded by forests that turned to flame each autumn. Paths wound between wooden houses where lanterns glowed softly, their light spilling onto the stone steps and fallen leaves. Haru walked through the village each morning, carrying bundles of firewood for neighbors since his father's back had grown too weak for heavy work. He often stopped by the shrine that overlooked the rice fields. It was a small place, with moss-covered steps and a stone fox weathered by countless seasons. The villagers said the shrine had been built to honor the spirit of the autumn. Night, an old guardian who listened to the crickets' chorus and carried messages from the departed. Few came to worship now, except during festivals. But Haru often lingered there, leaving small offerings of persimmons or chestnuts, not from obligation but from a quiet hope that somehow his mother could hear. That evening, as the shadows of dusk stretched across the fields, he sat upon the steps of the shrine, listening. The crickets sang with their usual patience, yet beneath it there was something else, a faint hum, steady and low, almost like a human voice. Haru. He froze, breath caught. The name had been clear, as if spoken beside him. Chapter 2: The Whisper Beneath the Song. For days afterward, Haru returned to the shrine, listening. At first there was only the chorus of insects, the rustle of leaves stirred by wind. But then, when the night deepened, the whisper came again, faint but undeniable. Haru listened. He pressed his palms against the stone steps, heart pounding. It was his mother's voice. He was certain. "Mother?" he whispered into the dark. His words dissolved into the sound of crickets, yet within that fragile song, he thought he heard a reply. "Follow the song." The words trembled through the night, then faded into silence. Only the insects remained, steady and eternal, as though nothing had changed. Chapter 3: Into the Forest Glow. On the following night, unable to resist the pull of the voice, Haru carried a lantern and stepped beyond the shrine, into the narrow path leading into the forest. The air was crisp with the scent of pine and fallen leaves. His lantern cast swaying shadows on the trunks, making the forest seem alive with silent watchers. The cricket's song guided him. Whenever he paused, uncertain which way to turn, the sound swelled on one side, like a beckoning call. He followed deeper into the woods. At last, he reached a clearing where moonlight spilled like silver water. There, in the center, stood a maple tree, its leaves burning crimson against the pale night. Beneath it, he saw a shape, a woman, her form faint as mist. His breath faltered. "Mother." She turned to him, her face soft with the same warmth he remembered, though her eyes glimmered like distant stars. "You heard me," she said, though her lips did not move. Her voice came woven into the song of the crickets. The autumn night carries voices that cannot cross on their own. "I have little time." Haru stumbled forward, tears rising. "Why? Why are you here?" "To guide you," she answered. "The village it has forgotten. The guardian sleeps, and soon the voices of the living and the dead will tangle. You must wake the guardian." Chapter 4: The Guardian of Night. His mother lifted her hand, pointing toward the grove beyond the clearing. "There lies the old guardian. A spirit bound in silence. Only the voice of the living can stir it now." Haru's throat tightened. "But how?" "By carrying the cricket's song," she said. by listening, and then speaking it anew. Her form wavered, fading into the cold air. Do not fear the silence. It is only the other side of the song. And then she was gone. Only the crimson leaves swayed above him, scattering like sparks into the night. Chapter 5 The Silent Shrine. Haru pressed on, guided by the song. The path narrowed, roots twisting beneath his feet, until he found himself before a hidden shrine half swallowed by moss and vines. Its wooden gate had rotted, and the stone lanterns lay broken. The cricket's song grew louder here, echoing strangely against the shrine walls. As he stepped closer, silence fell suddenly, heavy as snow. The air thickened, pressing against his chest. He realized then this was the guardian's slumber. Silence so profound it devoured even the voice of insects. Haru set down his lantern, closed his eyes, and listened. Though no sound remained, the memory of the cricket's song pulsed within him. He hummed softly, mimicking the rhythm he had heard every night. At first, his voice wavered, uncertain. But then it grew steadier, echoing the harmony of the field, the hum his mother had once sung by the veranda. The silence shivered. A low tremor passed through the ground. From within the shrine, a light stirred faint, golden, like the glow of an ember. Chapter 6 The Guardian Awakens. The air rippled as a figure emerged from the shrine. Tall, robed in autumn leaves that shifted like flame. The guardian's face was hidden behind a mask carved of wood, its surface cracked with age. Its voice was the rustle of countless leaves you sing the cricket's song. Few remember it now. Haru bowed low, trembling. My mother told me to wake you. She said the voices of the living and the dead are crossing. The guardian inclined its masked head. The border thins when forgotten. Each song, each prayer, holds it firm. Your mother could not cross, but through you, she was heard. Tears welled in Haru's eyes. Then will she be safe? She returns to the quiet beyond, the guardian replied. But she leaves you her strength. Carry the song. Teach others to listen. Only then will silence and sound remain in balance. The figure faded, leaving only the whisper of leaves. The shrine glowed faintly for a moment longer, then settled into stillness once more. Epilogue The Song That Remains. Haru returned to the village before dawn, the cricket's chorus still echoing in his heart. He did not tell anyone of the vision, nor of the guardian. Instead, he began to hum the song each night, sitting on the veranda as his mother once had. Children heard him and copied the tune. Elders smiled faintly, recalling long-forgotten evenings. Slowly, the habit spread, until families once again left their doors open on autumn nights, listening to the fragile music of crickets beneath the moon. And Haru, each time he closed his eyes, felt his mother's presence in the quiet harmony. She was gone, yet her voice lingered not as sorrow, but as part of the song of autumn itself. The nights of Akigawa glowed softly with lantern light, the air filled with both silence and song. And in the spaces between, the guardian kept watch, unseen but awake, as the crickets sang their eternal hymn. Twilight beneath the maple leaves. Prologue. The rustle of red. The season had shifted into that delicate in-between when warmth still lingered in the sun, yet twilight came sooner each day. The maple trees that crowned the hill above the village burned crimson, their leaves drifting slowly, like sparks shed from a dying flame. It was beneath these trees that Aiko often wandered at dusk. At 17, she was neither child nor adult, standing at the threshold of change as uncertain as the twilight itself. Each evening, after the day's chores were done, she climbed the moss-worn steps toward the maple grove, lantern in hand, and listened. Her grandmother used to tell her, when the leaves fall at dusk, listen carefully. The trees hold voices older than the village. They remember what we forget. Aiko never knew if it was superstition or wisdom. But after her grandmother's passing that spring, she found herself returning to the grove, hoping for a whisper, a sign. On one such evening, as the sky dimmed to violet and the lantern light flickered against the bark, Aiko thought she heard something faint. Like the hush of breath carried on falling leaves. Chapter 1. The Grove Above the Village. The village of Momiji no Sato, the home of maples, was small, cradled in the valley's arms. Every autumn, travelers arrived to see the hills blaze with color, but when winter came, the world grew quiet and only the villagers remained, tending fires against the snow. The grove above the village was older than memory. The shrine at its heart had no records, no priest to tend it. Only the villagers' offerings, bundles of rice, folded paper charms kept it alive. Aiko's grandmother had been the last in her family to visit the shrine faithfully. The trees remember, she used to say, leaving persimmons or tea at the altar. If we forget them, we forget ourselves. But now her grandmother was gone, and the shrine seemed lonelier than ever. When Aiko stepped beneath the arching branches, she felt a stillness that pressed close, heavy with expectation. That evening, she placed a small apple at the shrine's base. Her lantern flickered as a wind moved through the grove, stirring the crimson leaves into a slow dance. The sound it made was not quite the rustle of branches, not quite the sigh of air. It was softer, almost words. Chapter 2. The First Whisper. Aiko. Her name, carried so faintly she might have mistaken it for imagination. She froze, clutching her lantern tighter. Again Aiko. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, woven into the rustle of leaves. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice barely rising above the twilight hush. Only silence answered, followed by a scattering of leaves drifting down like embers. Yet she could not shake the sense of presence, the same warmth she had once felt beside her grandmother's futon, listening to her quiet breathing in the night. She knelt at the shrine, pressing her hand against the rough wood. "Grandmother, is it you?" A breath of wind passed through, lifting her hair. And within that whisper came words. Not gone, only waiting. Aiko's heart leapt. Tears stung her eyes. She wanted to cry out, to beg for more, but the grove had already fallen back into silence, the lantern's flame quivering against the darkness. Chapter 3: The Hidden Path of Leaves. The following nights, Aiko returned. Sometimes the grove was only a grove, quiet, rustling, beautiful. But sometimes, when twilight deepened into the first veil of night, she heard the whisper again. Follow. The leaves stirred in the same direction, as if pointing a path deeper into the forest. Lantern in hand, Aiko followed. The path was faint, nearly lost to fallen leaves, yet the air seemed to guide her, urging her steps. She came upon a stream she had never seen before, though she thought she knew the hills well. Its water glimmered in the lantern light, reflecting the crimson canopy above. Across the stream stood a stone marker, cracked with age, inscribed with characters worn almost beyond reading. She brushed the moss away. The inscription read, "To those who listen, the trees will speak." Her lantern flickered. The stream's surface rippled, though no wind blew. Then, out of the water rose the faint outline of a figure tall, robed in drifting leaves, its face hidden by shadow. Chapter 4: The Keeper of Twilight. Child of the maple grove, the figure spoke, voice like countless leaves falling together. You have heard the whisper. Aiko's hands shook. Who are you? I am the memory that lingers when voices fade. The grove remembers, and I am its keeper. The figure gestured to the forest around them. Your grandmother knew this place. She gave her voice to the leaves, so you might hear when the time came. Aiko's throat tightened. She's here? With you? In part, the keeper said. The grove gathers what is cherished, what must not be lost. But memory fades when not tended. Already, the village forgets the old songs, the offerings, the stillness. If it fades completely, all who rest within the leaves will be lost to silence. Aiko's lantern dimmed, the flame shrinking. She clutched it close. What must I do? The keeper's voice softened, as though carried from far away. Listen. Remember. Speak. The grove holds countless stories. Give them breath again, and the voices will endure. And as the figure faded back into the stream, Aiko heard the faintest echo of her grandmother's laughter, gentle, encouraging, like a hand upon her shoulder. Chapter 5: Songs Among the Villagers. The days passed. Aiko carried water, tended fires, and wove straw ropes with the other villagers. Yet in her heart, she carried the voices of the grove. At first, she hummed quietly while working melodies her grandmother used to sing. The villagers noticed. Some smiled, remembering. Others frowned, muttering that the songs were too old, too strange. But the children listened. They followed Aiko to the grove, their laughter echoing beneath the red canopy. She told them stories of how the trees held voices, of how the shrine watched over the village. She showed them the path to the stream, though the figure never appeared again. One evening, she led them in a small ritual. Apples, rice, and folded charms were placed at the shrine. Together they sang an old verse she recalled from her grandmother. The air stirred. Leaves fell in a circle, spiraling like flame. And within the hush of twilight, the children swore they heard whispers too. Chapter 6: The Return of Twilight. Winter came swiftly. Snow dusted the branches, but many leaves clung stubbornly, crimson against the white. The villagers, though busy with their own labors, began to notice. Some joined Aiko at the shrine, offering prayers. The songs spread quietly, not as duty but as comfort. One night, standing alone in the grove, Aiko lit her lantern. The flame glowed steadily despite the cold air. She whispered into the silence, "Grandmother, are you here?" The leaves stirred gently. A voice, warm as breath against her ear, answered, "Always." And for the first time since her passing, Aiko did not feel the sharp ache of loss. Instead, she felt surrounded by memory, by presence, by the endless rustle of leaves carrying voices through time. Epilogue: Beneath the falling red. Years passed. The girl became a woman, then a mother. Children grew, generations turned. Yet each autumn, when twilight fell beneath the maples, voices lingered in the rustle of leaves. Aiko's lantern, once small in trembling hands, was now carried by others' sons, daughters, grandchildren, each listening, each remembering. The grove did not fade. The keeper remained, and the voices of those who had come before mingled with those yet to be born, carried always in the quiet twilight beneath the maple leaves.